I Love Black People Radio on HUR Voices, Sirius XM, Channel 141. I Love Black People is more than a radio show. I Love Black People is a call from our ancestors to protect us from racial profiling all across the world. Go to iloveblackpeople.com and become a member today. Membership empowers you to live fearlessly and protect Black people globally from racism and xenophobia. Join us today and become a member of our global network with an online global green book with Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses to protect you and your community. Membership is free, and with you, we will become 10 million strong worldwide. I am because we are.
And welcome to another edition of I Love Black People. And we're so blessed to have our amazing good sister to return. Sister Erin McKinney, thank you for coming on. You're doing amazing things. Please share with us, give them a little background for the new listeners who may not know some of the gems and jewels you've shared with us in the past. Talk to me, sister.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm Erin Horne McKinney. I recently took a new role with Howard University. Howard last year.
Ain't you?
Last year received a significant gift from PNC Bank, their foundation, the largest grant that PNC has ever awarded, of $16.8 million to create a National Center for Black and HBCU Entrepreneurship. So that center, which is now called the Howard University and PNC National Center for Entrepreneurship, it has been put in place at Howard as their umbrella. It's based at Howard, but it's an umbrella center that also has 4 regional centers to create a network across all 100 plus HBCUs. So there's a center at Howard, there's a center at Morgan State in Baltimore, Clark Atlanta, and Texas Southern in Houston. And we will all work together to really work on what I'm calling 5 strategic pillars: research, resources, programming, curriculum, and access to capital, and doing this collectively, collaboratively. So a little bit about me is that I'm a serial entrepreneur, but I've also turned that work into really becoming an advocate and an activist for women and minority entrepreneurship because of just the issues and obstacles I faced as an entrepreneur, trying to help and get support. And not, many moons ago when I started my first business in my early 20s, I started a marketing communications firm in Minneapolis that was really focused on diversity marketing. And my very first client was General Mills, and went on to take on some really big national clients. But I had no idea what I was doing. And, I'd come up against something and someone say, well, do you have insurance? I'm like, oh, did I need that? And this is in my 20s. And so, I would try to seek out programs, and either I never saw anybody that looked like me, or the programs and offerings were cost prohibitive, right? Like, if I'm a struggling entrepreneur, I don't have $5,000 to take a class on entrepreneurship, so how do I fit in that? And then years later, I started my first tech startup while living in the Bay Area, and I could not get into the early tech incubators and accelerators and I had a technical co-founder who was working, a brother who was actually my web guy in Minneapolis when I started my company there. He was working for a tech startup, and I had a tech client who was one of my marketing clients for a tech company, a sister who she's from the Bay Area, had only worked at tech companies. And the 3 of us, I didn't even pay attention that we were 3 Black founders doing the unthinkable, right? Going to the early Y Combinators and Amazon Web Service programs in the mid 2000s saying, hey, we've got this idea. And since you're writing everybody else checks to to play with an idea and start something. And so we we were creating a personal CRM. This is just around the time that social media was just starting, but a lot of, and it was before the mobile app economy, but we kept getting denied everywhere we went. And I started looking at who was getting into these programs. And I'm like, wait a minute, there are nothing but older white men that run these programs and nothing but young white men getting in those programs. There were no women, there were no minorities. And then I also started looking at a lot of the tech companies. And I'm like, nobody that I know really is working at these companies, except for the ones that I mentioned to you. I mean, for the most part, they were usually one of the only Black people either in their entire company who weren't on the janitorial staff or administrative staff, right? And that was more because they were grandfathered in some sort of way. But even myself, so I thought, okay, you know what, I'll work at a tech company. And I started trying to do that. And I literally was told in interviews, you're not a good culture fit. You know, we rank HBCUs differently. Well, of course, they didn't even say HBCUs. They would say Black colleges because they weren't even familiar with the language of an HBCU. They would say we rank Black colleges differently in our hiring process. And so, you know, that automatically knocks you down. I wish this was a day where you'd record stuff, right? But this is like in my early 30s. And I just was like, you know what? I'm tired of this. Like, somebody's got to stand up and fight for us getting in the door, because I was seeing all of these unicorns happening in tech, which, similar to me, tech, was a new form of, it is digital media. And when you look at traditionally who had been the millionaires, like when I was growing up, who I thought like, okay, I want to be like, it was literally all the media owners, Ted Turner, Oprah, Sheila Johnson, Kathy Hughes. Those were people I aspired to be like. So I was like, okay, I got to get in this new media game, which is technology. But there was nobody like us, that looked like us, had gone to an HBCU at that time. And so got into doing this work to fight for equitable entrepreneurship. And I've been doing that for now almost 2 decades.
Wow, that was a lot, sis. I'm just trying to keep up with the whole journey. That was a heck of a. With that being said, I mean, now that you're taking all that you've learned and many of the resources that you've already obtained from going through some of the battlefields and scars, I don't like using the violence part, with the war going on and people taking that lightly. But I know the struggle is real. What are some of the things that you're taking from those experiences to this new project?
It's a great question. Some of that is, first and foremost, we still, even post George Floyd, there's an assumption that there has been an increase in access to capital for Black entrepreneurs. And that's actually not true. And there was a bit of a spike for just a hot second in 2021, where there were a lot of portfolios, venture capital portfolios were being called upon to say, okay, what does your portfolio look like? What does your investment portfolio look like? And so there was an introduction of investments into more Black founders than we'd seen before. But traditionally, prior to that, Black founders specifically, but I think this is a staggering number just in general. Women and minority entrepreneurs, out of all the billions of venture capital, have never really collectively have never reached over 8% of venture capital and receiving it, right, and getting invested in. And that even, started to tick up a little bit toward 10%. But even if you carve out from that, particularly Black founders, Black male founders, have hovered around 2% of all of venture capital. And Black female founders have stayed under 1%, right? So it's like 0.00002%. There was a really interesting study that came out a few years ago called Project Diane, done by Digital Undivided, that looked at that, and it documented how the average failing white male founder received about an average about 1.2 million in investment venture capital, and the average successful Black female founder received between 40 to 50,000. And that's
wow. That is, because I was getting lost in the percentages a little bit, because it almost sounded like you said that Black folks got 10% of all venture capital.
no. I was saying no. I said them combined with women, which were white women, Asian women. So women and minorities collectively were only getting 8%. At the height. But what I'm saying is, even within that 8%, Black men and women were collectively getting less than 2% historically.
Go ahead.
And the numbers now in 2022 are showing a decline in the spike that we saw in 2021, which still was never that much. And we haven't, what's crazy is that then, we have some of the successes that we have seen have been coming from Black actors and athletes saying, okay, we realize there's something going on with this tech game, so we're going to put, invest our money in this space into startups, right? But then like Andreessen Horowitz comes along and said, hey, invest with us and we'll invest your money, right? Wisely. And then they go put their money into like WeWork's Adam Newman, you know what I mean? Like, who is a complete failure, but still can get, some crazy amount of post WeWork can get an investment of, I think it's like 200 million or so. I don't remember off the top of my head. Cause I just, it's one of those things you don't remember because it'll make you angry. You know what I mean?
Right. He was almost, I know I don't want to say fraudulent, but he was not only a failure, he really did like some fugazi funny stuff.
It was fraudulent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's lucky not to be in jail.
Right, lucky not to be in jail. Let alone get gazillions of dollars.
Let somebody Black do that, right? That's what I'm saying. So my point is that, what I have seen from my experiences, access to capital is still a huge issue. And when it comes to infusions of capital into Black-led companies, they're usually predatory. Right. So we're trying to create, funding opportunities that are not predatory, that primarily are non-dilutive, or that if there's a way of generating wealth in a much broader sense, like teaching our community how to be angel investors, right? Teaching our community how to support us and invest in us, and why there's a benefit in that. So there's that educational piece, but we're also trying to make like just the language around entrepreneurship. There are studies that show that women and minorities don't identify with the word entrepreneur because they don't see themselves in it, right? So there's usually other language that is used, whether it's business person, business owner, side hustler. Like, there's so many people that I've met along the way who say to me, well, I'm not an entrepreneur though. But then I talk to them and they tell me how they got together with a family member and started like making greeting cards, and they sell them at farmers markets, or these just beautiful stories where people are trying to make a little extra cash. And it's like, but that is entrepreneurship,
Yeah. I think you're talking about. I remember with the dry cleaner, I used to tell. I didn't say entrepreneur because I was dating sisters. I think sometimes people were like, "Look, I don't want to say he owns dry cleaners. I'm gonna say he's an entrepreneur." So I used to always make fun. I said, "Look, I clean dirty clothes. Like, that's what I do, is clean dirty clothes." But the bigger thing that I learned was once I got into the tech game. There's a big difference saying you got a small business and you got a startup. When I had a small business, I would have Banneker High School. I would have all these folks at local churches asking me to put like ads in their book because I'm a business owner. So they say, oh, that means you must have some money. But when I say startup, the word startup is like, it's almost like implied, I'm looking for money. So I literally tell folks, look, say you're a startup. Even if you're an entrepreneur, look, say you're a startup, because it almost seems like they need some money as opposed to me being the person, Claire got his own business. Like, I was struggling. So saying I got my own business is giving you the wrong idea. So I think, like you said, language is real. and how we see ourselves, as well as maybe how we
It
perceive
is,
our
and it's
own
also
community.
culturally different, right? Like the Black community, it's like if somebody in our family says, if you're the first person in your family, let's say, to go to college, and people have put you through college, the expectation is for you to go get a good corporate job, and then you give back to somebody else so they can, or help pay for your family or do whatever. And if you were to say, no, I'm not doing that, I'm going to start a business, it's almost considered selfish, right? Because you're taking a huge risk and risking all that your family has, and of course we're going into entrepreneurship usually with student loan debt, right? We're going into it, like, we just have completely different barriers than a lot of other communities. And and it's funny because in other communities, people talk about with pride about their families, and how their parents were small business owners, and the family all lived together, and they owned a convenience store, or they owned a dry cleaners, or they, it's said with pride, and families kind of came together and supported that business. Communities came together and supported that business. um I think white supremacy is real, right? And our Black business districts were tore down, and we were really brainwashed to think and think that Black businesses are not good businesses, right? And not support and keep those dollars in community the way that other communities and cultures do. And it's unfortunate. And what we've seen is how we don't have these economic drivers anymore in our communities the way that we used to. And every once in a while, I mean, in some communities, you have these pillars who have been there for multi-generations, might be a Black owned funeral home. But you think about, sometimes Black-owned funeral homes are like some of the most successful businesses. But it's sad, right? Those are the businesses in community that have thrived the most, which is it's to their benefit after what's going on in our communities. But when we look at like the potential, what HBCUs have the potential of doing, and that's why we're really creating this network. So the 4 schools that I mentioned, Howard, Morgan, Clark Atlanta, and Texas Southern, this work that we're doing with this National Center for Entrepreneurship is not just focused on those schools. These schools serve as regional hubs to help build out ecosystems across states, get all of the information about entrepreneurial activities that are happening across those states, create resources, put all these things together so that we can be a one-stop shop, so you know exactly where to go, no matter what size business you are, no matter what industry you are, no matter what state you live in, you know what resources exist to help you and support your business, right? So we're creating that network of information, and using the fact that most of our HBCUs historically, right, are in Black communities, and how if we can set a precedence with those universities and colleges, those schools have the opportunity to change the tide, and thus also at the same time help those schools be entrepreneurial in their thinking around what can they be doing to new monetization strategies. Like, we got to change the game, and nobody is coming to save us, right? Like, we got to save ourselves. And even as we not even head into a recession, it's here, right? Inflation.
Yeah, I was going to bring this. I was going to bring up and I apologize. I was going to bring up the SBA and how you contrast or differentiate what you're doing than what the SBA does.
That's a great question.
I know, but when you started saying no one's going to come save us, like, to literally rely on the government after the government has done everything it's done to us, I think would just be so problematic. But I'll let you say your piece on that. But that when you said that we got to look at things differently, I don't think the SBA is going to look at things differently. I think they have a script, and I think it's fine. but literally we need real change agents that are literally going to help empower us, as opposed to this government programs that, if we look at the record, it is what it is.
Right. And well, yeah, there's
Or
a lot
not.
of,
I'm not going to put words in my. I mean, I'm problematic with my extremism.
no,
But
it's okay. I mean, people could probably argue the same about me. But what I would say is this. One thing about the SBA that I think is a great model for us is their SBDC program, which is a Small Business Development Centers. Howard, by the way, is when that program started in the 70s, it started with 10 pilot schools, and Howard was the only HBCU included in that pilot. And to this day, Howard is the only school of the 10 pilot schools that is still has an SBD center, and we have it actually in our School of Business, and we're only one of 2 HBCUs in the country that are lead centers, which means they get the main funding from the SBA, and then have like sub centers in their unit. The other one being in the Virgin Islands, but. So that's a resource that we have. So it's actually interesting that you mentioned this too for a second, because I want to point out that these are the things that make the center being at Howard, being the national center. The reason it's here is because we are unique. We do have this SBDC that's a powerful driver and is a gem in that whole SBDC system. And just to wrap up this SBDC point, the SBDC program itself is a good model for what we're trying to do across HBCUs, is create a network, right, of resources, share those resources. And so I think if you look up and we're working closely with our SBDC and others to kind of model and think about how we do stuff. But I agree with you that government hasn't worked. So we do have to think about things differently, innovatively, and we have to, and sustainably, right? How do we make this happen when this PNC money wraps up and these things are gone? But again, going back to what makes Howard unique is we do have this historic SBDC. Also, we have WHUT, public television station, and WHUR. FM, which are both owned by Howard. And WHUT, by the way, is the only Black-owned public television station in the whole PBS system, right?
Wow.
So,
well, we're on XM radio on Howard University Voices, channel 141, one of the few universities with not only a XM station, they got 2 XM stations. So
correct. And so using the power of media, right? We have this built into our university, and we are partnering with them and working with them. They're actually documenting already the growth of this center and the creation of it and the development of it and the implementation. So we have an opportunity to tell our story. The other thing is that, we are a research institution and that makes us really different from other HBCUs. Not all of them are research institutions. So who better to do research about Black entrepreneurship issues than us, or to at least lead and help collect and work together on that. And then lastly, I'll point out too, being in the nation's capital makes a big difference from the policy and advocacy perspective, right? We are uniquely positioned, and, just even from our graduates, not just undergraduates, but also from our graduate school and professional schools, we have the network to do a lot of policy and advocacy and really rally the troops, if you will, about this work in a really unique way that others are not able to. I'm not even going to mention that obviously we have the Vice President of the United States right now.
All right, Kamala Harris. Woo, woo, woo.
And so, when you think about like what's going on with our personal network, there's a lot that makes Howard unique to try to do this work. But this is all about HBCU love. We cannot do this alone, and we're not doing it just for us, right? We are doing it for our entire HBCU network, and we are also doing this for Black people, and we're doing this collaboratively and with a spirit of love and support. And really, if we can solve for the least of us, we will solve for all of us.
Well, all right. Listen, I mean, that was a lot, and I know you're doing a lot, been doing a lot, and we appreciate it. And if we don't say it, thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, you're our superstar. At the end of the day, we need our superstars too. So thank you for being our HU superstar, coming Black home and spreading that. I guess it's not sunshine then, it'd be a star. So I guess it's got to spread some star. Okay, you know what I mean.
Well, the sun is a star, by the way.
Go ahead, look, just breaking it all down.
Look at the HU education.
Look, shut up. Look. Like literally, when I say sunshine, I'm talking about the star. God bless you. Humbly, our superstar, shining the sunlight on all of us.
I love that you are trying to motivate us, educate us, and inspire us. So just know that you inspire me too. So thank you so much.
Thanks for the love, too.
This is I Love Black People Radio on HUR Voices, Sirius XM Channel 141. I Love Black People is more than a radio show. I Love Black People is a call from our ancestors to protect us from racial profiling all across the world. Go to iloveblackpeople.com and become a member today. Membership empowers you to live fearlessly and protect Black people globally from racism and xenophobia. Join us today and become a member of our global network with an online global green book with Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses to protect you and your community. Membership is free, and with you, we will become 10 million strong worldwide. I am